In 1959, an accountant at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios basically sat down at a desk and signed a physical purchase order for 40,000 tons of Mediterranean sand.
Right, 40,000 tons.
Yeah, 40,000 tons. And that sand was then loaded onto ships, transported across the sea, and just dumped onto an 18-acre backlot in Rome, all to build the Chariot Arena for the movie Ben-Hur.
It's almost hard to picture that kind of logistics today.
Exactly. And when audiences sat in the theater a year later and looked at the screen, I mean, every single grain of that sand was visible. The money had been converted into literal physical reality.
You could see it all.
You could. But today, a studio executive signs a wire transfer for, $300 million to fund a modern summer tentpole. And audiences walk out of the theater looking at each other, scratching their heads, and asking one very simple question.
Where did all that money go?
Exactly. Where did it go? So welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are embarking on a forensic audit of Hollywood.
And we are looking at a really fascinating stack of documents to guide this audit for you today.
Yeah, it's a massive stack.
It really is. The spine of our conversation today is this sprawling internal research dossier from the NFTS, notes from the study investigation team.
Right.
And we're pairing that dossier with a mountain of SEC filings, specifically 10Ks and annual reports from major studios alongside these structural economic breakdowns from firms like Deloitte, KPMG, and McKinsey.
And what triggered this entire investigation for the NFTS team is a concept they've dubbed the Cleopatra Odyssey paradox.
Yes.
The editor of the dossier framed it so brilliantly. I'm actually going to read their observation verbatim because, well, it's the exact puzzle we're going to spend the next hour solving together.
Go for it.
Okay, they wrote, I went to see the Odyssey last week, and honestly, it didn't quite hit me the way I expected it to. Then I caught Cleopatra on television with my dad the other day, and I was struck by how completely that film seemed to wear its money.
Wear its money. That's such a great phrase.
It is. They go on to say, you could see the sets, the costumes, the extras, the physical scale. And I started wondering, how can a 1963 movie make its enormous budget feel so legible when a modern film costing hundreds of millions can sometimes feel less substantial?
It is a profound observation because it relies on the raw, unvarnished reaction of you, the viewer.
Right. It's an honest reaction.
Exactly. You watch Cleopatra, and despite all its flaws, the capital allocation is entirely legible to the naked eye. It feels heavy. It has texture.
Yeah, you feel the weight of it.
But you watch a modern $300 million blockbuster, and it often feels weightless.
Almost hollow sometimes.
Right. It feels like you're looking at something that exists merely as a suggestion of reality rather than reality itself.
But before we really dig into the mechanics of why that is, we need to lay down some guardrails.
Yes. Absolutely necessary.
Because the NFTS editorial constitution is very strict about how we approach this kind of material.
Crucially, this conversation is not it's not a vehicle for nostalgia.
Right.
We are not here to indulge in a tired modern movies are terrible rant.
No one wants to hear that anyway.
Exactly. We're also avoiding the generic reductive debate of practical effects versus CGI. And we are certainly not doing subjective film criticism today.
So our lens today is strictly business, industrial economics, and the allocation of capital.
Right.
Which means we have to hold a very specific tension in our minds for the duration of this deep dive.
We do. We have to operate under two assumptions simultaneously.
Okay, let's unpack those. Assumption one is what?
Assumption one. Film studios are highly sophisticated, rational businesses run by very intelligent executives who are managing massive corporate portfolios.
Right. They aren't stupid. They do not set fire to $300 million just for the fun of it.
Exactly. And assumption two. Audiences are reacting honestly to what they see on screen.
Right. They are accurately perceiving a lack of physical density or tangible value in these modern films.
So the ultimate question we're investigating is, if that $300 million isn't buying visible screen value, what exactly is the corporate machine buying?
It's buying something.
Oh, it's definitely buying something.
Okay, so to understand the modern balance sheet, we have to establish a baseline. We have to look at old Hollywood, the era where capital was almost entirely visible.
Let's return to that 1959 production of Ben-Hur.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ledgers for Ben-Hur right now. It cost roughly $15 million in 1959.
Which was a fortune back then.
A massive fortune. If we adjust for inflation, we're looking at about $160 million today.
Right.
That is a very healthy modern blockbuster budget. But the physical footprint that money purchased is almost hard to comprehend.
The logistics read like a literal military mobilization.
Yeah.
They built 300 separate sets at Cinecittà Studios outside Rome.
300.
Right. And this covered over 340 acres. They constructed a replica of the city of Jerusalem that took up 10 square blocks, complete with a 75-foot Joppa gate that was actually made of stone and wood. It wasn't plywood and plaster. It was real stone.
And we have to talk about the chariot race arena alone. They didn't just build a facade. They built an 18-acre functional racetrack.
An 18-acre track.
Yeah, it took a year of physical labor. That set alone cost $1 million, which was roughly 6.5% of the entire budget.
Just for one location.
Exactly. And then they spent another $1 million over 5 weeks just to shoot that one 9-minute sequence.
Which is wild. And we're talking about employing 10,000 physical human extras.
10,000 people.
And a costume department that manufactured 100,000 distinct pieces of clothing.
It's just staggering.
So the critical economic metric here is what the NFTS dossier calls the cost-legibility ratio.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, in 1959, a reviewer for The Hollywood Reporter explicitly noted that the $15 million production cost was, quote, all there on the screen.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Every dollar spent was converted into a tangible object, a human body, or a measurable physical activity.
Right.
The sets cast real shadows because they were real objects. The extras actually displaced physical space. The cost-legibility ratio was essentially 1-to-1.
But I mean, that model of brute force physical construction had to have a ceiling, right?
It absolutely did.
And it seems like Cleopatra in 1963 was the moment the industry hit that ceiling at full speed.
Cleopatra is the hinge point of film economics. It had a reported budget of $44 million.
Which is what, adjusted for inflation?
That translates to nearly $500 million today.
$500 million, wow.
Yeah. It is widely considered the film that nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox.
I'm not surprised.
Right, and while the physical scale was undeniable, I mean, the procession into Rome remains one of the most astonishing things ever put on film. The budget also introduced us to the concept of modern production and efficiency.
Because that $44 million wasn't just buying sets and costumes, was it?
Not at all. A massive portion of that capital was burned before a usable frame was even shot.
Wait, how?
Well, they originally tried to build Alexandria in England.
In England. For a movie about Egypt.
Exactly. And the weather destroyed the sets. Then Elizabeth Taylor fell severely ill, leading to massive holding costs.
Holding costs, meaning?
Meaning the studio was paying thousands of crew members to simply wait around for months.
Just doing nothing.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about her contract because that represents a massive shift in how capital is allocated to talent.
Oh, right. She was the first actor to get $1 million deal, wasn't she?
She was. But she also secured 10% of the gross box office.
Wow.
Plus, the production was so chaotic, they were literally writing scenes the night before shooting.
So they had this whole massive machine running, burning cash with no script ready.
Exactly. They were paying peak union rates for writers and crew to invent the movie in real time on the most expensive set in human history.
That's a nightmare.
So the budget of Cleopatra is really the first time we see capital being heavily consumed by mismanagement, logistical friction, and unprecedented talent leverage, rather than purely physical assets.
It's the beginning of the detachment of the budget from pure visible screen value.
Absolutely. Fox actually had to sell off its massive Los Angeles backlot, which is now Century City, by the way, just to cover the cash flow crisis Cleopatra created.
Okay, hang on. I need to push back on this narrative a little bit.
Sure.
Because I'm looking at these two massive examples, Ben-Hur and Cleopatra, and I can't help but wonder if we, or the audience, are suffering from massive survivorship bias here.
That's a very fair point.
Are we just romanticizing the past because we only remember the spectacular, expensive outliers?
Right.
Feels like we're judging the entirety of 1920s architecture by looking only at the Empire State Building and conveniently forgetting all the cheap, crumbling tenements that surrounded it.
I like that analogy.
Right. Weren't like 90% of the movies made in the 1950s and 60s just cheap, forgettable B-movies, westerns, and creature features?
You are absolutely correct to point that out, and the NFTS dossier actively audits for that exact bias.
Okay.
The median film in 1963 was indeed a modestly budgeted genre picture. Cleopatra was a statistical anomaly.
So why focus on it?
Because the purpose of this investigation is to compare the peak allocations of capital across different eras. We are comparing the apex predators of the industry, so to speak.
Got it.
When we look at the absolute most expensive film of 1959 and compare it to the absolute most expensive film of 2024, the fundamental composition of what those peak dollars actually purchase has shifted dramatically.
Okay, that makes sense. So if Cleopatra proved that building a physical empire in Rome was financially unsustainable, how did the studios pivot?
Because the industry didn't die, right?
Right, it didn't die, it mutated. We move into the 1970s, the era of New Hollywood, and the very definition of a blockbuster changes completely.
Following the financial trauma of the epic era, the studios briefly ceded control to auteur directors, people like Coppola, Scorsese, Altman.
The golden age for a lot of film buff.
Yeah, and they figured out that you didn't need a cast of 10,000 to make a massive profit. A film like Easy Rider in 1969 was made for roughly $400,000 and returned $60 million.
Insane ROI.
Right. So the value shifted from physical spectacle to cultural resonance and directorial vision.
But, I mean, the auteur era of the 70s didn't last forever. The real structural earthquake happened in 1975 with Jaws, and then 1977 with Star Wars.
Yes.
And reading through the financial history here, it seems Jaws didn't just change what a movie was, it changed how a movie was sold.
Jaws revolutionized the mechanics of distribution.
How so?
Prior to 1975, a major studio film would typically open in a handful of premium theaters in major cities, like New York and Los Angeles.
Like a limited release today.
Exactly. They would rely on reviews and word of mouth to build prestige, and then slowly expand the film across the country over a period of months.
Huh.
It's called a platform release.
But Universal didn't do that with Jaws.
They did the exact opposite. They opened Jaws on 460 screens simultaneously across North America.
Which was unheard of at the time.
Completely unheard of. And to support that unprecedented footprint, they executed a massive $700,000 national television advertising campaign.
That feels like the exact moment the opening weekend was born.
It really was.
The industry stopped being about a slow prestige burn and became about manufacturing an unavoidable immediate cultural event. You had to see it this weekend because everyone was talking about it.
Right, the financial equation shifted. Marketing spend became almost as important as production spend.
And then 2 years later, George Lucas introduced the second structural innovation with Star Wars, the realization of the IP ecosystem.
Oh, the George Lucas deal.
I love the mechanics of this deal. It's legendary. He famously waived an additional directing fee for Star Wars, right?
He did. In exchange, he asked 20th Century Fox for the licensing and merchandising rights.
And Fox gave them to him. Because at the time, movie merchandise was basically a rounding error on a balance sheet. They thought they were getting a total bargain.
Fox fundamentally misunderstood the asset they were creating.
Clearly.
Lucas realized that a film could be more than just a 2-hour theatrical experience. It could serve as the anchor for a perpetual, high-margin revenue ecosystem.
Toys, comic books, apparel, bedsheets.
Exactly. The ancillary markets quickly became vastly more lucrative than the theatrical box office itself.
I want to pause here and really think about the implications of that shift for our listener.
Go ahead.
If the movie is no longer just a standalone product, but is actually the loss leader or essentially a 2-hour, multi-million-dollar neon billboard for a broader ecosystem of merchandise and theme parks, then the studio isn't really buying art anymore.
Right.
They're buying brand awareness. Does that explain why the physical texture of the film starts to matter less?
How do you mean?
Well, if the goal is just to make sure a kid recognizes Darth Vader so they buy the action figure, the studio doesn't strictly need to build a physical Death Star. They just need the image to be recognizable.
That is a highly astute analogy. When a film transitions into an intellectual property asset, the production budget's core function changes.
It's a totally different game.
You are investing in character establishment, global brand recognition, and franchise longevity. The film is merely the engine for a much larger commercial machine.
Yeah.
As long as the engine runs and successfully captures the audience's attention, the specific physical materials used to build that engine, whether it's real wood and steel or just pixels, becomes secondary to its functional output.
And that transition in corporate philosophy set the perfect stage for the next major transformation.
The digital revolution.
Right. If physical reality is expensive, dangerous, and hard to control, the studios needed a way to generate scale without the friction of the real world. Enter CGI.
The advent of computer-generated imagery, specifically the breakthrough seen in Terminator 2, Judgment Day in 1991 and Jurassic Park in 1993, represents a profound rewiring of production economics.
Let's break down the mechanics of that rewiring because it's fascinating. In 1959, capital was converted into physical objects,
The sand.
the sand, the stone. In 1993, capital begins to be converted into computational output.
Yes.
It's a fundamental shift from tangible assets to data. And the paradox here is that millions of dollars are being spent specifically to create images that are designed to be invisible.
That's the irony of it.
You are spending a fortune so the audience explicitly does not notice the work.
The demand for elaborate digital effects skyrocketed, but the structural economics underlying the VFX industry developed into a deeply dysfunctional system.
And the NFTS dossier highlights a sobering, almost tragic case study that perfectly illustrates this, right?
Yes, the collapse of Rhythm and Hues.
This story is wild. If you don't know it, Rhythm and Hues was a top-tier visual effects house.
Elite level.
Elite level. In 2013, they won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects for their breathtaking work on Life of Pi. The tiger in that movie is a digital masterpiece.
That's flawless.
But mere weeks before they accepted the Oscar on live television, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and laid off over 250 employees.
It's heartbreaking.
How does the company responsible for the defining visual spectacle of the year go bankrupt in the exact moment of their greatest triumph?
The failure of Rhythm and Hues exposes the deeply flawed mechanism of the VFX business model, which is based on something called fixed bidding.
Walk me through exactly how a fixed bid works in this context.
Let's say a major studio approaches a VFX house to create a 5-minute digital space battle.
Okay.
The VFX house calculates the rendering time, the artist hours, and bids, for example, $10 million for the sequence.
Simple enough.
The studio agrees, and the price is locked. The problem is that the creative process of modern filmmaking is highly fluid.
What does that mean in practice?
During post-production, a director or a studio executive might review the sequence and decide the spaceships shouldn't be red, they should be blue.
Okay. Minor change.
Or they decide the battle shouldn't happen over a planet. It should happen in an asteroid field.
Ah, massive change.
Right. But the contract is already signed for $10 million.
So who pays for the labor to redesign the ships, rewrite the physics simulations, and re-render the entire sequence?
The VFX house absorbs the cost.
Wait, entirely?
Entirely. They are caught in a brutal trap. If they refuse to make the changes or demand a new contract at change order, the studio, which is one of only perhaps 5 major buyers in the entire global industry, will simply blacklist them.
They'll just take their future business elsewhere.
Exactly. So the VFX house forces their artists to work massive, unpaid overtime to meet the release date, burning through their own thin profit margins until they're operating at a massive loss.
That is staggering.
It's a broken system.
The most expensive, technologically advanced component of a modern $300 million blockbuster is effectively built on the backs of precarious, non-unionized workers.
Yes.
They were treated less like elite digital artists and more like gig economy laborers. The studio essentially shifts all the financial risk of directorial indecision onto the vendor.
And to survive this margin compression, the global VFX industry engaged in massive labor arbitrage.
Outsourcing.
Exactly. Work is aggressively outsourced to facilities in India, Malaysia, Vancouver, and London locations, where foreign governments offer massive tax subsidies to underwrite the labor costs.
So when I look at a bloated modern budget, I have to wonder, is that money actually buying better visuals, or is it just subsidizing incredible logistical inefficiencies?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Are studios paying a premium simply for the privilege of endless digital revisions?
The evidence strongly suggests that a significant portion of modern capital is consumed by the iterative nature of digital post-production.
Meaning you're not buying a specific outcome.
No, you are not necessarily buying a more visually spectacular shot. You are buying the right to fundamentally alter that shot 50 times before the film is locked.
Which leads us into perhaps the murkiest part of this entire investigation.
Hollywood accounting.
Yes. If the money is being vaporized by fixed bid overages and global labor arbitrage, how can we even trust the reported budgets in the trade in the first place?
We can't. We rely heavily here on the empirical research of film economist Stephen Follis.
Okay, what did he find?
He conducted an analysis of over 62,000 feature films released since the year 2000, and his findings are stark. We no longer possess accurate public data on what movies actually cost.
None.
In the last 5 years of his study, only 3.3% of feature films shared any public budget data whatsoever. the numbers have effectively vanished.
But even when a trade magazine reports that a movie cost $250 million, that number is largely a fiction anyway, isn't it?
It's an illusion.
Let's dissect the mechanism of this Hollywood accounting. How exactly does a studio make hundreds of millions of dollars legally disappear on paper?
It begins with corporate structuring. When a major studio greenlights a tentpole film, they do not produce it under the parent company's umbrella.
Right.
They incorporate a unique, highly specific subsidiary shell company. Let's call it Blockbuster Movie LLC.
So Blockbuster Movie LLC is technically the entity that hires the crew, rents the cameras, and assumes the financial liability of the production.
Correct. When the film is released into theaters, the box office revenue flows back into Blockbuster Movie LLC.
Makes sense so far.
In any normal industry, you take the gross revenue, subtract the literal cost of the crew, the cameras, and the marketing, and whatever is left is your net profit.
Right, basic math.
But this is where the parent studio intervenes to ensure that net profit never actually materializes.
Okay, I want to try an analogy here to see if I grasp the mechanics of this. Tell me if this works.
Let's hear it.
It's like I set up a lemonade stand, but I force the stand to rent the pitcher from me for $500 an hour.
Okay.
Then I force the stand to buy the lemons exclusively from my sister for $1,000 each.
Right.
And finally, I charge the stand a management fee just for existing. The stand sells $1 million worth of lemonade, but because of all the fees I charged it, the stand is technically bankrupt.
That is a perfect, simplified model of overhead allocation. The parent studio acts as the supplier and the landlord to its own subsidiary.
It's brilliant in an evil way.
They charge Blockbuster Movie LLC massive distribution fees, often 30% of the gross right off the top.
30%.
Yes. They charge overhead fees, which means the movie is paying for the electricity and maintenance of the entire studio lot in LA, even if the movie was actually shot on location in Iceland.
Unbelievable.
They even charge the subsidiary interest on the money the parent studio loaned it to make the film in the first place.
So they are acting as their own bank, charging themselves interest, and logging it as an expense against the movie.
Precisely. And the entire purpose of this labyrinthine shell game is to avoid paying out back-end deals.
To the talent.
Exactly. If a writer, an actor, or a creator negotiates for net profit participation, meaning they get a percentage of the profits after the film breaks even, they will likely never see a dime.
Because it never breaks even on paper.
Blockbuster Movie LLC will forever remain in the red on paper. This is the fundamental reason why top-tier entertainment lawyers will fight tooth and nail for first dollar gross.
Which is a percentage of the raw box office revenue before the studio's accountants are allowed to touch it and charge all those fake fees.
Exactly right.
So let's bring this all the way back to the Cleopatra Odyssey paradox we started with.
Let's do it.
If I walk into a store and buy a pair of handmade leather boots for $500, I expect $500 worth of premium leather and expert cobbling.
Sure.
But in Hollywood, if I read that a movie costs $300 million, I might actually be looking at a movie where a massive percentage of that budget is just the parent company charging itself rent, arbitrary distribution fees, and corporate overhead.
That is a core revelation of this section.
Mm-hmm.
A publicly stated $300 million budget is a structural illusion.
It's smoke and mirrors.
It is an inflated figure bloated by opaque accounting charges and legal structures designed specifically to minimize talent payouts.
So when our dossier editor or any audience member sits in the dark, looks at the screen, and intuitively feels that the film lacks the density or texture of a $300 million investment.
Their instinct is financially accurate. A vast portion of that capital was never intended to be converted into visible photons on the screen.
Okay, so if we strip away the accounting fictions, the phantom overhead, and the global tax subsidies, what is the remaining actual cash being spent on?
The NFTS dossier presents a fascinating provisional hypothesis here. They argue that modern blockbuster budgets are fundamentally designed to purchase a concept called optionality.
Optionality. Define that in this context.
Optionality, within the context of industrial film economics, is defined as the financial capacity to delay commitment.
Delaying commitment.
It is the ability to avoid locking in a creative decision until the absolute last possible second.
Now, from an artistic standpoint, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to explicitly avoid making a decision sounds like absolute madness.
It does.
But from a corporate finance perspective, I assume there is a terrifying logic to it.
It is entirely rational behavior when you analyze the risk profile of the modern studio ecosystem.
Because the stakes are so high.
As we discussed with Star Wars, a massive film today is rarely just a movie. It is the load-bearing pillar for a multi-billion-dollar corporate apparatus.
Right.
A single failure doesn't just lose money at the box office. It damages theme park attendance, tanks, merchandising contracts, and depresses streaming platform subscription numbers.
It's a domino effect.
The downside risk of a tentpole film failing is existentially catastrophic for the parent corporation.
So the budget is no longer just funding a production. The budget is funding an insurance policy against failure.
That is the mechanism exactly.
Huh.
Studios use enormous influxes of capital to purchase flexibility.
What does that flexibility look like on the ground?
They proactively budget tens of millions of dollars for extensive reshoots, months after principal photography is actually concluded.
They plan to shoot it twice.
Yes. They utilize constant, rigorous test screenings in suburban malls to gauge audience reactions on a highly granular level.
Focus grouping the art.
Right. If the test audience doesn't like the villain's motivation, the studio employs armies of VFX artists to digitally alter the performance, change the dialogue, or sometimes insert entirely new characters into the film weeks before the premiere.
They are essentially A/B testing a $300 million piece of art.
Yes, they are.
And the organizational friction of doing this must be staggering. If you are managing 40 different VFX vendors spread across 4 continents, you aren't just paying for artists.
No, not at all.
You are paying for an army of lawyers, data wranglers, pipeline managers, and coordinators just to make sure the files sync up. It has to be fundamentally more expensive to manage a decentralized digital workforce than it was to manage one giant backlot in Rome like they did for Ben-Hur.
The logistical overhead is immense, but the studios view this expenditure as a necessary cost of risk mitigation. They are trying to guarantee that the final product appeals to all 4 quadrants of the global audience.
But let me challenge the efficacy of this optionality.
Yeah, right.
Is buying flexibility just a polite corporate euphemism for buying the right to be indecisive?
Well,
Because consider the filmmakers of Ben-Hur. They had to commit. Once you pour 40,000 tons of sand and build an 18-acre arena, you cannot hit Ctrl-Z because a test audience in Burbank thought the chariot race was a little too dusty.
you're locked in.
You're locked into physical reality. Does having infinite digital choices actually dilute the final product? Does it sand down all the idiosyncratic, interesting edges of a film because you are constantly tweaking it to be as safe and broadly palatable as possible?
That is the central aesthetic critique of the modern blockbuster model. When a director knows they can digitally alter anything at any point, the necessity for rigorous, decisive pre-production diminishes.
Because you can always fix it in post.
Exactly. The institutional default of the industry shifts heavily toward safety and homogenization. And this pursuit of risk reduction is deeply intertwined with another massive structural change we have to examine: distribution. Where and how is this film actually going to be consumed?
Right, because the theatrical experience is no longer the sole or even the primary economic engine for these films.
We have transitioned from a classical model where revenue was entirely dependent on convincing a human being to leave their house and buy a physical ticket to a highly fractured landscape dominated by streaming platforms.
Let's talk about that transition. How did the math change?
The classical theatrical model demanded that a film be a singular, compelling event. It had to be visually arresting enough to justify the effort of attendance.
You had to want to leave the house.
But the collapse of the DVD and home video market in the late 2000s fundamentally altered the math.
Because DVD sales used to be massive, right?
That market used to serve as a massive financial safety net, particularly for mid-budget films. Its evaporation forced the industry to polarize.
Meaning what?
You either make a massive, save franchise tentpole or a micro-budget horror film. The middle disappeared. And now, the rise of streaming platforms has introduced an entirely new set of optimization pressures.
How does the delivery mechanism of a streaming platform actually change the physical content or aesthetic of a film? What are the mechanics there?
It alters both the technical deliverables and the narrative pacing. A film optimized for a streaming platform must capture the viewer's attention within the first few minutes, otherwise the algorithm registers a click away.
So you can't have a slow, atmospheric opening anymore.
Rarely. Furthermore, the visual aesthetic is often compressed.
How so?
The color grading and lighting choices are frequently calibrated to look acceptable on a brilliantly lit, highly contrasted 65-inch OLED television rather than a massive, darkened theatrical canvas.
So they are actively lighting the movie so you can still see what's happening even if you have all the lamps on in your living room.
Yes. Furthermore, When a film is a component of a massive franchise, such as an entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it must fit seamlessly into a predefined visual and narrative continuity.
The house style.
Right. This corporate requirement for aesthetic uniformity can severely constrain the unique visual flair of an individual director.
They can't just do whatever they want.
The studio requires the film to look and feel like the overarching brand. This often necessitates a flatter, more standardized, digitally composited aesthetic.
Think about what this means for you, the viewer, sitting on your couch.
It's a profound shift.
If you are a studio executive allocating capital, you are no longer optimizing the budget to deliver a single mind-blowing transcendent night out at the cinema.
No.
You are optimizing the budget to create a piece of content that functions reasonably well while someone is scrolling through their phone, folding laundry, or answering an email.
You are buying brand consistency and algorithmic reliability, not groundbreaking visual texture.
The budget is being deployed to ensure the product functions flawlessly within the distribution ecosystem rather than maximizing the awe-inspiring nature of the physical production.
That's exactly it.
This all makes a terrifying kind of logical sense from a corporate perspective. But to truly test this theory, to prove that capital behaves differently under different incentive structures, we need a control group.
A different system entirely.
Right. We need to look at what happens when a completely different system tries to build a blockbuster. Let's look at the international landscape, and specifically the Chinese film factory.
The explosion of the Chinese domestic film industry over the last decade is unprecedented in cinematic history. To understand their scale, you really have to look at the infrastructure.
Tell me about it.
By 2021, China had constructed over 82,000 cinema screens.
82,000.
Yes, and they built massive state-of-the-art physical production facilities, most notably the Dalian Wanda Group's Oriental Movie Metropolis, which is an $8.2 billion sprawling studio complex built to rival or exceed anything in Hollywood.
$8.2 billion. That's an insane investment.
And the box office returns they are generating internally are jaw-dropping.
Give me some examples.
We are talking about domestic films like Wolf Warrior 2, a massive action blockbuster that grossed $870 million in China alone.
Wow.
Or The Battle at Lake Changjin, a sweeping historical war epic that pulled in over $900 million.
These are numbers that rival an Avengers movie, but they are doing it almost entirely within the borders of a single country.
Correct. But this ascent is not organic. It is the result of a deliberate, highly coordinated, state-driven initiative.
Right. The government is involved.
The Chinese government utilizes the mechanics of state capitalism to foster this industry. They provide low-interest loans from state-backed banks. They offer significant tax incentives.
And quotas, right.
Crucially, yes. They enforce aggressive protectionist quotas, typically allowing only 34 foreign films a wide release each year.
So they severely limit competition from Hollywood.
And they also mandate strategic blackout periods during major national holidays, ensuring that local main melody films, which is the term for patriotic films, face absolutely no Western competition at the box office.
So when we analyze what capital buys in China versus what it buys in Hollywood, we see a fascinating divergence.
We do.
China is successfully using its capital to buy massive, slick, highly visible physical and digital spectacle. They are building real tanks, real sets, and putting the money directly onto the screen.
But there is a massive structural caveat to this success.
Right, and as a reminder, we're reporting impartially on the dossier's findings here. We aren't taking a political stance, just examining the economic reality.
Absolutely. The NFTS dossier labels this dynamic creativity in chains.
What does that mean?
The Chinese Communist Party views cinema primarily as a vehicle for the projection of national narratives and state ideology. Censorship is not an afterthought. It is omnipresent.
So the scripts are vetted heavily.
Every script is rigorously vetted. Any sensitive political, social, or historical topics are strictly off-limits.
So how does that affect their global reach?
Well, while this centralized authoritarian power can manufacture incredible technical spectacles and guarantee domestic financial hits, the ideological rigidity severely cripples their ability to export these films globally.
Wolf Warrior 2 was a phenomenon at home, but it barely registered in Western markets.
Exactly. The overt jingoism, the heavy-handed state messaging, it simply doesn't translate. The lack of an open marketplace of ideas severely caps the emotional complexity and universal resonance of their films.
This creates a stark contrast in capital allocation. China's budget is hyper-optimized for one massive, highly controlled domestic audience.
Right.
Hollywood, conversely, operates in a highly fractured global marketplace. We briefly discussed how different international systems yield different efficiencies. Look at the UK leveraging massive tax rebates to build sound stages, or South Korea's CJ using vertical integration to dominate their regional market.
Right.
But Hollywood is really the only entity trying to sell the exact same product to everyone on Earth simultaneously.
And that introduces an enormous amount of friction.
And that leads me to a really critical question about that global friction. Hollywood studios spend millions of dollars and thousands of labor hours navigating this global market, constantly calibrating their films to appease foreign censorship boards so they don't lose access to crucial territories.
It's a massive expense.
We all saw the controversy with Top Gun Maverick, where the studio initially removed the Taiwanese flag from Tom Cruise's jacket in the early trailers to appease Chinese censors, before eventually restoring it when the political calculus shifted.
A perfect example.
So does Hollywood's massive budget partly go towards sanitizing the film?
Yes.
Are they spending millions of dollars in post-production, specifically to ensure the film is completely frictionless, globally palatable, and offends absolutely no one anywhere?
It is a profound hidden cost. When the financial mandate is that a film must perform exceptionally well in North America, Europe, Latin America, and Asia simultaneously, the narrative and visual choices naturally regress to a globally acceptable mean.
It's the ultimate form of risk reduction.
It consumes massive amounts of capital without adding a single ounce of visible texture, unique artistic perspective, or physical density to the screen.
Okay, we have painted a fairly bleak picture of an industry dominated by risk aversion, invisible digital labor, franchise management, and global sanitization.
It sounds rough, I know.
But we cannot ignore the glaring exceptions to our rule. What about the modern films that do wear their money? We have to return to the editor's original puzzle, the Odyssey.
The counter-arguments are absolutely essential to this audit.
So the Odyssey, released in 2026, directed by Christopher Nolan, carried a reported budget of $250 million.
Right.
It is the very film that sparked the editor's observation about modern weightlessness.
Yeah.
How does a film like that, or Nolan's previous work like Oppenheimer, fit into this structural analysis?
Oppenheimer is the perfect analog to dissect here. Nolan made a massive global blockbuster about quantum physics and the atomic bomb, and he famously declared there was zero CGI in the film. None.
Zero CGI for a movie culminating in a nuclear explosion. How does he subvert the entire economic structure we've just spent an hour breaking down?
Nolan's methodology is the absolute antithesis of the modern institutional default. He does not purchase optionality. He purchases physical reality.
Tell me more about that.
For Oppenheimer, he utilized highly complex, practical, in-camera effects. He shot entirely on 65mm large-format IMAX film.
The mechanics of that are fascinating. He actually partnered with Kodak and Panavision and forced them to engineer brand new black and white 65mm film stock specifically for that project.
Right, because the technology literally did not exist in the world prior to his demand.
He forced a massive corporate entity to invent a new physical technology just so he could capture light on celluloid in the exact manner he desired.
That is the purest modern definition of visible capital.
Directors like Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve with Dune, James Cameron with the Avatar films, or Joseph Kosinski with Top Gun. Maverick, their films look and feel fundamentally different from standard franchise blockbusters.
And why is that?
Because they possess the massive leverage required to resist the institutional default.
They have acquired the rare power to simply say no to the corporate machine.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
They enforce the use of practical locations, they demand the construction of physical assets, and crucially, they commit to their creative decisions deeply in pre-production, completely eschewing the reliance on endless digital optionality and reshoots in post-production.
They forced the studio to allocate the budget toward physical craft.
Exactly.
So, to clarify the framework here, these films do not disprove the Cleopatra Odyssey paradox. Rather, they are the exceptions that prove the rule.
That's a good way to put it.
They demonstrate exactly what a $250 million budget can look like and feel like when a powerful auteur manages to hijack the corporate apparatus and redirects the capital away from risk management and optionality and forces it back into the physical world.
That is a highly accurate synthesis. The institutional default toward digital optionality is real, and it is dominant, but it's not absolute.
Right.
It can be overridden by sufficient creative leverage and a massive box office track record. However, we cannot end our audit here.
We have to look at the future.
We are currently standing on the precipice of another fundamental technological shift, one that could alter this economic dynamic more violently than the transition to CGI in the 1990s.
We have to talk about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Right. If auteurs are currently the only ones holding the line on visible physical spectacle because it is so prohibitively expensive and difficult to produce, what happens to the industry when technology fundamentally craters the cost of creating spectacle?
Generative AI is poised to drastically reduce the cost of digital visual effects rendering and iteration.
The NFTS dossier poses several critical, unresolved questions regarding the integration of AI into the production pipeline.
If VFX, the ability to generate a photorealistic city or an alien landscape or a massive crowd, becomes significantly cheaper and faster to produce, how will the studios allocate those savings?
Will they take the millions saved on rendering farms and reinvest it to put even more spectacle on the screen, attempting to create visual experiences we haven't even conceived of yet?
Or will they simply reduce their overall production budgets, keeping the aesthetic standard exactly where it is, but drastically increasing their profit margins?
Given everything we have unpacked today about corporate behavior, risk mitigation, and Hollywood accounting, I think we know exactly where that bet should be placed.
It's pretty clear.
They will absorb the savings to protect the bottom line.
It is highly probable that we will see a severe bifurcation of the industry.
Meaning a split.
Yes. On one extreme end of the spectrum, you will have spectacle-optimized, massive theatrical events driven by powerful auteurs who demand premium physical formats like IMAX, the Nolans, and the Villeneuves.
And on the other end?
On the other end of the spectrum, you will have highly efficient, AI-assisted, digitally optimized content designed purely for streaming platforms and the frictionless maintenance of franchise IP.
It's the ultimate divergence of the medium. The physical theatrical experience becomes a rare, bespoke luxury good, like buying vinyl records or mechanical watches. Meanwhile, the streaming experience becomes a highly optimized, infinitely malleable, frictionless commodity.
And every single scenario we project ultimately ties back to our core question: what is the capital actually buying?
Right.
If artificial intelligence effectively eliminates the cost of digital rendering, then the value of optionality drops to near zero.
Because you can change it instantly for free.
Exactly. The friction of production is completely removed.
Yeah.
And when you remove all friction, you often remove the texture that makes the art feel real.
Let's bring all of the threads of this investigation together and synthesize the journey we've been on.
It's been a long journey.
We started an hour ago with the Cleopatra Odyssey paradox. We started with the simple, honest observation that older films from the classical era seem to wear their massive budgets visibly. You can see the sand, the sweat, the scale.
Right.
Meanwhile, modern blockbusters often feel strangely insubstantial and weightless, despite costing hundreds of millions of dollars.
And we have navigated this paradox not by concluding that modern filmmakers are less talented or that modern movies are simply worse.
No.
We resolved it by recognizing a profound structural shift in the actual commodity being purchased by the studios.
We've audited the balance sheet and discovered that Hollywood is no longer primarily buying physical sets, elaborate costumes, and thousands of extras.
They're buying organizational flexibility.
They are buying the right to delay hard decisions through endless digital reshoots.
They are buying risk reduction through global homogenization and A/B testing.
They are buying franchise durability and IP ecosystem management.
And perhaps most significantly, they're buying the massive, convoluted industrial capability required to coordinate thousands of invisible digital laborers spread across the globe.
The headline budget figure you read in the trades is a misdirection. $300 million does not represent the literal cost of the images projected on the screen.
It represents the cost of operating a massive, global, corporate risk management apparatus.
The studios are behaving entirely rationally within the unforgiving constraints of modern franchise economics.
And simultaneously, audiences are reacting entirely honestly to the resulting lack of physical texture.
The paradox is mathematically sound.
It really is.
Which leaves you, listening to this, with a final provocative thought to mull over. We are entering an era where digital perfection and AI generation are going to make visual spectacle cheaper, easier, and more ubiquitous than ever before in human history.
Soon, Anyone will be able to generate a photorealistic exploding spaceship or a sweeping alien vista on their laptop in an afternoon.
So perhaps the ultimate luxury in future filmmaking won't be flawless, infinite CGI at all.
No, it won't.
Perhaps true premium value will be found in the visible proof of physical constraint. It will be the genuine friction of a real location, a real human stunt performed in camera, a real crowd of thousands of people breathing the same air, and real light actually hitting celluloid film.
A return to reality.
As production costs continue to shift, ask yourself, are studios competing on who can spend the most money? Or are they competing on who can make you, the audience, truly feel that the money was well spent? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the world behind the screen